About 14,200 years ago, a man, a woman, and a small dog were buried together in a single grave in what is now Germany. The dog wasn't food and it wasn't a sacrifice. It was a member of the family, deserving burial alongside its human companions. This grave, known as Bonn Oberkassel, is the oldest confirmed evidence that humans and dogs weren't just neighbors, but were already close friends more than 14,000 years ago. But the real story of how the wild wolf, one of history's most dangerous predators, became man's best friend, is far more complex and stranger than you'd imagine, and it's full of scientific debate that remains unresolved to this day. This is the story of the oldest and deepest friendship between humans and any other living creature on Earth. There was no single one day when some human decided to domesticate a wolf. The story is far more complicated than that. Most scientists today agree that all domestic dogs descend from a common ancestor shared with the modern gray wolf. But they aren't the same animal. They split from an older common ancestor somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago, and the precise estimates remain fiercely debated among paleogeneticists. Stranger still, scientists don't even agree on where this domestication happened. Some genetic studies suggest it occurred once, in a single location, perhaps in Siberia or East Asia, while other studies propose it happened independently in at least 2 different places, in Europe and Asia, before the lineages later merged. The most widely accepted theory today, known as the self-domestication hypothesis, proposes that the process didn't actually begin with human initiative at all, but with the wolves themselves. Imagine a human camp in the Paleolithic era, surrounded by piles of hunting refuse and animal bones. Some wolves, the bolder and less naturally fearful ones, dared to approach these scraps to feed on them, while the more aggressive or fearful wolves stayed away. Over many generations, humans themselves, perhaps without any conscious intent, favored the survival of the friendlier, calmer wolves nearby, while the more dangerous or aggressive ones were killed or driven off. This process, scientifically known as self-selection, gradually produced an animal less fearful of humans and more capable of coexisting with them, without anyone deliberately planning it at first. The most striking evidence for this hypothesis came from a famous Russian experiment that ran for decades, begun by geneticist Dmitry Belyaev in the 1950s on silver foxes, distant relatives of dogs. Belyaev selected only the calmest and friendliest foxes toward humans in each generation for breeding, ignoring every other physical trait entirely. Within just a few dozen generations, an extremely short span on the evolutionary timescale, the domesticated foxes began changing physically too, without any deliberate selection for those traits. Floppy ears appeared, curled tails, black and white patchy fur, exactly the same physical traits we see in domestic dogs today and don't see in wild wolves. This experiment proved that simply selecting for one behavioral trait, friendliness toward humans, can drag along an entire suite of unintended physical changes, strongly supporting the idea that dogs partly domesticated themselves through this very mechanism. But the relationship didn't stop at mere mutual tolerance. Once humans began noticing the benefit of having these semi-domesticated animals around, a real partnership started to take shape. Early dogs alerted humans to approaching predators or strangers during the night, and helped track prey while hunting with a sense of smell, hundreds of times more powerful than a human's, and in return they gained shelter, protection, and a more stable food source than solitary hunting in the wild. This early partnership, built on pure mutual benefit, was the foundation on which every complex form of the human-dog relationship we know today was later built. With the beginning of human settlement and the rise of agriculture and the first civilizations, the relationship with dogs began evolving much faster. In ancient Egypt, dogs weren't just working animals. They held an important religious and spiritual status. The god Anubis, god of the dead and of embalming, was associated with the body of a jackal or black dog, and dogs were sometimes honored with formal burial rites, similar to those given to humans, with some even mummified in rare cases. Archaeologists have discovered massive mass graves in the Egyptian city of Saqqara containing millions of dog mummies, suggesting the existence of an organized and widespread cult. In Mesopotamia, dogs appeared in carvings and drawings illustrating their use in guarding and hunting, and even in magic and medicine, where some ancient Sumerian texts held the belief that dog saliva had healing properties. And across different continents, from indigenous peoples in the Americas to Aboriginal tribes in Australia, humans independently developed similarly close relationships with dogs, used for hunting, pulling loads, and companionship. confirming that this bond wasn't a phenomenon confined to a single culture, but a recurring universal human pattern. But the biggest and most accelerated transformation in the history of the human-dog relationship didn't happen in ancient times. It happened relatively recently, during the 19th century in Europe. For thousands of years, dogs were generally classified by their practical function: hunting dogs, guard dogs, herding dogs, without strict, precise classifications or unified physical standards within each type. But with the rise of the Victorian middle class and the emergence of the concept of the pet as a social symbol and a means of showing off wealth and taste, an unprecedented interest exploded in breeding purebred dogs according to precise, publicly declared physical standards. The Kennel Club was founded in Britain in 1873 and began officially documenting and organizing dog breeds for the first time in history, setting strict standards for ear shape, coat length, body size, and eye color for every recognized breed. Within just a few decades, an extremely short span compared to thousands of years of slow natural evolution, humans, through intensive selective breeding, created hundreds of entirely new breeds, from enormous dogs like the Great Dane to tiny ones like the Chihuahua. Even though all of them descend from the same basic biological species, this enormous diversity in shape and size, difficult to find a parallel to in any other domesticated animal species on Earth, was a direct result of intense and deliberate human intervention in selecting and mating animals to achieve predetermined aesthetic or functional traits. But this revolution in selective breeding also came at a biological cost. The intense focus on certain physical traits, like the flat face of the English Bulldog or the extremely elongated body of the Dachshund, led in some breeds to recurring, chronic hereditary health problems, including breathing difficulties and spinal pain, an issue that still sparks widespread ethical debate among veterinarians and dog breeders to this day. In the 20th century, the role of dogs expanded radically far beyond traditional household companionship and guarding. During the two world wars, dogs were used to carry messages across battle lines, detect buried landmines, and even search for the wounded amid the rubble of battlefields, thanks to their superior sense of smell. And in the following decades, humans developed highly specialized roles for dogs that had never existed before at all. Guide dogs for the blind, capable of disregarding wrong commands that might endanger their owner. Dogs trained to detect drugs and explosives in airports, with an accuracy surpassing any mechanical device. And even modern dogs, capable of detecting the scent of cancerous cells in blood samples or a patient's breath with an accuracy rivaling some advanced medical tests. Recent scientific studies have shown that the relationship between humans and dogs isn't just an inherited social habit, but has a real measurable biological and hormonal basis. When a human and their dog look into each other's eyes, oxytocin levels rise, the hormone sometimes known as the love hormone or the bonding hormone, in both of them simultaneously. The very same precise hormonal mechanism that bonds a newly birthed mother to her infant. This mutual hormonal interaction doesn't occur with any other pet, with this same strength and clarity, suggesting that thousands of years of shared living and parallel evolution have profoundly and mutually reshaped the neurochemistry of both species. Today, more than 470 million domestic dogs live around the world as pets or working animals, spread across nearly every continent inhabited by humans except Antarctica. Some researchers' estimates suggest that the total number of dogs, including stray and semi-domesticated dogs, living on the margins of human societies without direct ownership, may exceed 1 billion dogs worldwide. And yet, despite this whole long history of partnership and shared evolution, scientists still keep discovering new and surprising details about how this unique relationship began every few years, with every new genetic analysis of ancient dog bones, newly discovered at scattered archaeological sites around the world, from a wild wolf cautiously waiting for a chance to approach a human camp, fearful and hesitant, to a creature that today sleeps on human beds and is sometimes buried in family graves. Alongside its owners, this friendship has traveled a journey spanning tens of thousands of years, and its complete story, with all its precise genetic and behavioral details, remains unfinished to this day.